What's up, guys? It's Mr. Janvid, and today we are back for another episode of On the Contrary. This podcast initially was super like Pokemon tactics related, and over time, I'd gotten so many messages from real people. Right? One of my things I always say there's a real person behind that avatar. Sometimes we can forget that, especially as a content creator. It's, you just everybody's a number, and it requires that reminder of, like, 20 views or 20 human beings came to check out this thing I decided to put out even when they didn't have to. And so uh with the whole everybody there's a person behind the avatar, the podcast eventually evolved into those avatars uh having a voice, right? And so now it's really come down to real Pokemon players sharing how the game has improved their offline lives, or just joining a particular community and being amongst um, just fellow like-minded competitors. A lot of those principles or relationships transferred into bettering their offline lives. And so, just like that, or just like those times, we have another guest today. You're on your Discord thing. You have Giovanni. What do you want me to call you anyway?
Yeah, Geo's good.
Gio. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We have Gio here, and yeah, he's another example. Matter of fact, I'd prefer for you to share from your side of the story. Um, like, what ended up having you, like, maybe how did you end up in Mons? How did you find out about the boot camp we did, and then, like, what made you want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I played Pokemon as a kid, but I started playing Showdown in high school as a way
Mm-hmm.
to not pay attention in class.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't play it too seriously. My buddies were more into like random battles. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
most common venue for that. And then at some point, I don't know if I discovered it on YouTube or stumbled across OU,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in Gen 7. I put a few games into it, probably like never gotten above the 1300s. I remember I played with Mega Venusaur, but that was it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I just kind of put it away for a while. And then I think during the pandemic is when I like really got put onto it again. And I think that kind of came from an initial interest of uh, random battles again. But then I started, watching a lot of content, and
Mm-hmm.
at first I think I discovered Joey,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually Blunder, and then eventually, actually, the way I became familiar with you is the promotions in I think Joey's videos for your book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the art of competitive Pokemon. I was bored, I had nothing to do, and I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And I thought that I had the discipline to teach myself using that book, um, to actually, you know, get something out of this hobby that I was, really invested in. I spent way too much time playing, and I didn't think when I played, and I just was in the 1400s because I knew everything. And when we talk about the different tenants, like the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
tenant, I'm like
Mm-hmm.
I'm on top of that at all times. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
how every single mechanic in the game works, but the other ones were really where I struggled when we ended up doing the boot camp. But so
Mm-hmm.
I did the book. I had some sort of results from it, but it was pretty minimal. I think I just kind of took from it what I wanted and not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, really became invested.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept playing a lot, and I didn't wasn't improving, and I kind of had the same reaction when I came along your channel. I was like, oh, this he because I think you maybe started posting content again. Where you weren't posting the whole time or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends. I've for years been on and off, so you might have
Yeah,
caught me at a time where I just started
think
again.
that's I think that's what had happened. Is I had like been watching Joey and Blunder, and then
Mm-hmm.
I came across. I was like, oh, he's posting. I remember him.
Mhm.
Like so I was booked, so I started watching your videos and then uh became really invested. I really liked I think at the time you're doing some like like team builders, and I think that's always
Mhm.
been the one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in Pokemon, and something
Mhm.
that I'll always like I would always spend hours on before, like trying to find the perfect last mon on the team.
Right.
But anyway, yeah. Anyway, I just was approaching it all wrong, and I didn't really for a while care to actually put in the steps to fix it, to fix that. And I like was frustrated and confused why I wasn't getting better, and it was because I wasn't putting that effort in. And
Mhm.
I think actually at the time in my life that was a big sort of theme. Like I was, and it was not something I was used to either. I was a really high achiever in high school,
Mhm.
like top four in my like 400-person class. You know, I got into an Ivy League, and
Mhm.
I went a bunch of different um, like had been accepted to a bunch of different colleges, was in for
Mhm.
engineering, was like, you know, really, really try hard, caring.
Mhm.
Then
Mhm.
I got to college, and it was the first year that COVID hit. Was
Mhm.
it split up my first year of college, and I think the pandemic really messed with my flow. But at this
Mhm.
time, I was also really already struggling with a lot of uh, depression and anxiety, and I I ended up I had a really bad breakup around the time as
Mhm.
well that COVID hit, and then it just sort of boom, extra isolated, and then all of a sudden I just things just didn't matter the same way that they did before. And I think that part of that was a reaction to like a breakup that I think was a long time coming and probably should have happened way before.
Mhm.
Um, and part of that was, I mean, I think it was a hard experience for a lot of people.
Meaning
But it,
COVID, right?
yeah, just well, COVID, but also like specifically the isolation with COVID
Okay.
in those first few months. And it was like 1 week later, I was basic after that. I broke up with someone I was with for over a year, and
One
and
week
1 week
into
later,
COVID, or
isolation.
1 week after the breakup, COVID happened.
Yeah, 1 week after the breakup, COVID happened.
Okay.
So anyway, at this point, everything just didn't matter the same. School was online, and I'd already at this point wasn't feeling super invested with school. Um, and that was for me what had mattered for a while. And so eventually I just stopped caring as much. And I started not doing as well in school, which is never something I had a problem with ever.
Mhm.
Like I would always be able to get by no problem because I'd pay attention in class, and like I was just not super easily distracted. I mean, I would get distracted, but in class you didn't have as many distractions, so like laptops and all that started being part of it. But now I
Mhm.
was supposed to do school from my bedroom, um, where I have my laptop that I'm doing it on, which is like the biggest distraction because Pokemon Showdown's on there.
Right.
And so all that I do is just waste my time on playing Pokemon, not really focus or go to class or whatever,
Mhm.
and expecting to just be fine because I'd always been fine. But in reality, I really wasn't doing the same thing anymore, and I wasn't doing it with Pokemon either. I just kind of, and this is around the time when I started smoking weed
Mhm.
a lot more. I had some exposure to it before, but I wasn't something I would I wouldn't have called myself a stoner at the time.
So
But
actually,
then,
right there, a question I had. You mentioned you had anxiety and depression. Was this pre-breakup, and then that led into why you broke up, or was that post-breakup and then COVID
yeah,
amplified it?
I actually think it was pre-breakup. This is something I had struggled with for a while, all the way starting probably in high school, and
Mm-hmm.
so and I it definitely contributed. Both of our mental health contributed to the way that our relationship, and it was a little rocky and our
Mm-hmm.
breakup, and it definitely yeah, it definitely uh wasn't just my fault in this situation, and but and both of our mental healths kind of conflicted with each other, but
Mm-hmm.
it was not something I'd really learned how to handle it in that point in my life. And so I think I still hadn't had a full grasp on it, and then I got to jump right into COVID. Something actually was a really big help for me in that process was I did something called an IOP. It's an intensive outpatient program, and basically it was a lot of people. Typically, most of those people were coming down from a like partial hospitalization or something like that, maybe after a suicide attempt or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then they would step you down. So you'd go from like a uh, inpatient and then partial, which was basically you'd travel there. It'd be like your 9 to 5 for like a couple weeks, and you'd meet with therapists and psychologists
Mm-hmm.
and psychiatrists. And then the next step down from that would be IOP, which intensive outpatient, and this time was COVID, so this was actually remote. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of stepped up, which was the more atypical case, but it's happened for some people too. It was basically 10 hours a week of therapy, 3 hours a week, or 3 hours, 3 days um, of group therapy, and then one
Mm-hmm.
hour of individual therapy. And this was a big help for me. And it was like a perfect example of just sort of seeing other people in your position. I was always so afraid of group therapy, or not afraid, but I didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Why was that?
but I think it's extremely common until you do it for that to be the case. But nevertheless, for me, I think I had always just basically said like, oh, like it's a me problem. Like, and it's not that I don't feel like it's that no one gets me. Like, that's not really what it is. And I think it was partially what it is. And it's sometimes that you don't want to admit that, or you really don't think that maybe, but,
Right.
or at least hearing other people having your story really does help. And I think actually the biggest thing for me that I loved about it was I felt I was so capable of helping other people. And it would put you in a position where telling your story about like, what you had been through
Yeah.
and what you were currently struggling with, like weed abuse because you started using medicinally to help with sleep and anxiety and depression. And now
Right.
you just kind of now it's affecting the rest of your life, right? And so
So
but
so
also
this was post you starting to smoke.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And then it was also, this was post breakup, and I talked to people who were divorced, and I was just an 18-year-old kid
Mm-hmm.
who broke up with his long-term girlfriend, but I gave them insight on like, like their handling their whatever, their divorce, and it was just people, from like pretty dissimilar walks of life, from people that were in there there were some people 70 years old in there, and I was at 18, and
Oh. Oh,
what do
so
we
it
have in
wasn't. Oh,
school, right? So
I thought that it was like a bunch of high school kids. So
no,
they're
yeah. So
saying,
by the time I was that old, I was 18 or 19, so I was with adults. So these were people that were I had nothing in common with most of these people, which was
mm,
sort of the best part. It was like all these people from different walks of life, like with completely, different stories, but they're all looking for some, they're just all looking to share and make you feel welcome and then
mm-hmm,
get better together. And I think that's something that I felt in the academy, which is a big reason why I was like sort of willing to, I'm extremely frugal, so it's not something I would have otherwise spent money on to do the boot camp. But I really thought that this seemed like maybe another experience similar to that I could
mm-hmm,
actually sort of put to work towards one of my hobbies.
mm-hmm,
And I also listened to other episodes of the podcast, and having that, so hearing some of those stories, help
mm-hmm,
make me think that maybe that could be me. Oh, I did the boot camp. I uh,
mm-hmm,
I I got better at a game that I enjoy, and it's rewarding to feel like something you spend a lot of time on, you're getting better at. And also that can spill over to the rest of your life. And since I did the boot camp,
mm-hmm.
and
Because at the time, you were dating a new girl, I think. Because this was earlier this year, or you
no,
were.
no, at the time, no, I've been with my current girlfriend for 3.5 years. So
meeting her. That's what I mean.
Oh,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Shar was a so
Yeah, yeah.
because in the story where you left off for the audience, they're at the point where you're broken up, COVID hits,
Right.
depression, group therapy. So there is no new person yet in that story. I know
That is
that because you told
right.
me, but
My fault. I misunderstood
mhm,
what you meant. But yeah, so there's a lot of time I missed in there, I guess. But I ended up going back to school in the fall after I did this IOP, and I felt like I know my like life was changed, and I didn't change my behavior though.
mhm.
I
Then
and
what about you? Did you feel like changed?
um I definitely changed my priorities.
Mhm,
I at this point had sort of identified that none of these people, when they were sitting in their position, were like, I wish I spent less time doing things that I like in my 20s, you
mhm,
know? So I think that part of that just sort of made me realize, putting all of my self-worth into school where I was struggling was not what I needed as much as it
mhm,
was sort of what I had been trained to do. My family really was motivated about that. They really wanted me to go to college, and so it was something that I just cared for implicitly. So I just started focusing on what I thought at the time mattered,
mhm.
which I think in some ways, and I hadn't realized it at the time, was was sorry, I think in some ways at the time it was sort of like a coping mechanism to not have to face my fears of sort of failing at school. So that way I had this excuse that, if I couldn't do it, then it was because I didn't really try that hard.
Mhm. I know that
Yeah,
one a lot. Yep.
yeah, and it was totally something I was not admitting to at the time.
Right.
And I thought, no, I'm just doing this because I've changed my perspective. I've gone to IOP. I'm a cured man. Like
Mhm.
I was still taking like some medications and like I was still seeing a therapist. It was really
Right.
I can't recommend enough. But I uh I didn't think that you know I didn't think I didn't change my behavior, and I was hoping that despite that my my fortunes would turn, and I got what I deserved. So I did
What
okay in
was that?
school,
What did you
but
get?
I ended up failing a class for the first time that
Mhm.
semester. Right after I did this IOP, that after I didn't really take school too seriously the prior semester, and I thought that I was just like ready to go and like
Mhm.
whatever. Another thing that happened this semester though is I got my current girlfriend who
Mhm.
we've been together since then and we live together now.
Mhm.
Um, and we started dating, and I think at the time, um, sorry, my cat in the background.
No, you're good.
Um,
We actually can't hear him, so I didn't know.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway, yeah, so around that same time, there's a lot of hectic things happening in my life, and I told myself that I was focusing on what mattered. Maybe it wasn't true. I sort of do wish I got more out of my schooling, but um, I I moved on. Eventually, it wasn't that big of a deal. I I did have a I did have a pretty big, I don't know, freak out. I did get pretty devastated that I was supposed to be cured, like effectively.
You're
I don't
talking
think I
about you're talking about after failing their first class?
Yeah, yeah, sorry. After failing the first class, I wouldn't say that I really thought I was supposed to be cured, but in a sense, I was like, this shouldn't have happened.
So
I don't deserve this. Like I did what I was supposed to do. Like I went to the group therapy. I did everything right, and I still like ended up in the wrong place. And the truth was, I still wasn't doing everything right.
mhm.
I had allowed myself to sort of I was hoping to get something out of nothing, and it's not how it works. So
So
uh,
actually that's huge because, typically like your type, you know, he was coming up, doing well in school, intelligent, that type, right? And I resonate with that deeply. We have, and I do say we will tend to have a fixed mindset, right? Because growing up, you're good at things really early, particularly school related things. You get
Right.
praised for it. And so, you grow up with this kind of like, you know, if I'm not good at it immediately, then it's not for me. Or, you know, that kind of drudging through things is not part of the DNA because you're like, I'm just a genius. You might not consciously think of it like this. And sometimes you
Right.
may not consciously think of it like this, but, it's kind of like, well, I'm supposed to get it right away. So why would I have to change? To change would imply that I'm not a natural talent. And so usually when, London Bridge comes falling down, that type will default to, this wasn't my fault, it was the game, right? I got hacked. Or, you
Absolutely.
know, Pokemon
That's
is
totally
just a
what my
shitty
reaction.
game. Right.
And I
So
went to the administration. I was like, I'm getting screwed by this professor, and I wasn't.
right,
I just wasn't.
right.
I,
So that's
it
the
was
thing I want to know though. Like, at what point were you able to have? Because that's a really mature moment. I can hear the maturity in you from that change. So it was like, at what point did you grow the pair to be able to go? This was actually my fault, because that must have taken a hell of a ego check. So what? How did you get to the point where you were able to go? This wasn't hacks. Like, I just didn't play well. Like, I actually didn't. I let him get in his Heatran there. Like, like, at what point were you really like, this is actually my fault, and swallowed your pride?
yeah. So I think it was after I had another big fail, and I'll get to that in a sec. So
Mm-hmm.
after that, I retook all of my classes that I took all the classes I needed to in the next semester. I retook the class or an equivalent class that I needed to. I got a good grade in it.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely sort of got lucky. I wouldn't say I really changed a lot. I think I ended up
Mm-hmm.
dropping a class late and maybe even getting a bad grade in another, but I got away with it that time. And then I think
Mm-hmm.
that also reinforced some of that behavior was like, I can get away with this. And
Mm-hmm.
then that summer, I had an internship. I got away with doing almost nothing.
Right. The
I
rules don't
wasn't
apply
really
to me.
I I got away with it. I mean, they weren't happy with me, but in the end, but I was still going back to school the next year. I wasn't looking for a return offer. I didn't want to work there long term. I just kind of wanted to maybe say I learned something from it. Even
Mm-hmm.
though I can't really say that, I I can pretend, in future job interviews type thing, right?
Right.
And the next summer, I went through school. I did okay. I kind of kept doing, or the next semester after the summer, I kept doing the same thing. Um, I I I kind of just kept expecting. I just kept expecting different results, and at that point, I started school, started not going super great again, but I just at that point it wasn't a priority for me. Pass your classes, graduate, move on. I did that. I tried in the ones that I cared about. I did it in the others I didn't. And then I got a job offer for another internship that summer at Amazon. That's like every software engineer. Oh yeah, I didn't mention I got a degree in computer science with a focal path in cybersecurity. And at that point, that was like every software engineer's like dream job. And despite everything that I'd gone through, it all worked out. All I needed to do was not fuck this up. Pardon my French.
This was after college, or is this like
Yeah, this
transitioning in out of college?
was third to fourth year of college. So I
Okay.
was a junior and I got a job offer and I ended up not even doing well in the last class that I took that last semester, but it didn't matter because at this
Mm-hmm.
point I got the job offer. I was very talented. I did well in a lot of classes.
Mm-hmm.
My GPA went down almost every semester. So it started off pretty well. So I was able to get some opportunities. I had a lot of good work experience. I'd gotten an internship at a place the previous summer. I had interned somewhere else before, but it wasn't as notable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was able to play off my experiences really, really high, and I got a job at Amazon, and
Mm-hmm.
they paid me more money than I could have ever imagined, even just as an intern.
Right.
Um, and absolutely squandered that. And
How so?
so it was sort of the similar story. I think the biggest theme was procrastination, and I would sit in my bed, which was a huge habit that I regret. And it was
Mm-hmm.
sort of just learned from, years of being, you know, anxious. I just was like attached to my bed in a lot of ways, just like a safe place kind of thing. And so I was stressed about my work, and then started procrastinating, which is a
Mm-hmm.
common, coping mechanism. It's an
So
unhealthy one.
but you were working from home, so this job didn't require you
Again,
like going.
this was still during sort of the pandemic times. There was some ability to go into the office, but nobody was there when you did go, so it just
Mm-hmm.
didn't pose as like a reasonable idea for me. So
Yeah.
I chose to work from home, and it was a terrible decision. And it just sort of allowed me to be in my environment where I had the
Mm-hmm.
most possible distractions. And I I it's a psychological concept to compartmentalizing being key to productivity. It's
Mm-hmm.
extremely frowned upon to do anything in the bed that isn't sleep or sex, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like it can totally mess with both your quality of sleep and also your quality of work if you're trying to work from the bed. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't gotten good at the remote work stuff, and I
What actually happened?
um so yeah, I started off by getting stressed about the work and then
Mm-hmm.
procrastinating it. And then because I was behind, I started getting more stressed about the work and
Mm-hmm.
because it was piling up and continued to procrastinate. And then eventually, they're looking for something. And then came sort of the misrepresentation of the truth. I
Mm-hmm.
basically I was not I was putting myself in a delaying that I constantly delaying any opportunity where I needed to, produce something
Mm-hmm.
and trying to speak as though it existed without doing any demos or anything like this. And eventually I was so behind that there was no way I was going to be able to produce everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sort of panic set in. And rather than what had always happened when I procrastinated in high school, when panic set in, I would just hunker down and just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Problem was is that most of those things were, tasks that weren't expected to take, weeks at one of the top companies in the world. They were tasks meant to take like hours
Mm-hmm.
for high school students. And I was, just not prepared for what I had, put onto myself. And I didn't get a return offer. The world didn't end. I went on to live,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't get a return offer. And that was a pretty big bummer for me, but I also sort of then decided, after the fact, oh, I didn't really want to work here anyway. You
Of
just
course, of
you just
course.
feel like a cog in a machine, like you don't really.
Right.
To be truthful, I don't think that this was 100% on me in the sense that I think the environment to do like work from home is extremely challenging and is not for everyone. And especially tested my capabilities and discipline at the time where I was not in a position and I didn't have practice. I think is honestly the most important part. I didn't have practice doing the stuff from remotely correctly. A lot of other people had at that point. That they had taken their schooling seriously when they were doing it remote, and they had sort of you know, they'd built up good habits in doing that. Maybe they weren't sitting in their bed when they would do it. They'd sit at a desk or something like that. And so, you know, the environment, the situation, I felt sort of like I was put on a team where a lot of people were not at my location, so I didn't feel like I was part of anything. And I do think that there was something to be said about just sort of not feeling like part of anything and just being extremely isolated at the time and how that impacted things. And I still think I accept most of the blame. But the environment absolutely if it was different, I think it would have gone differently. That
Mm-hmm.
being said, you can't change the environment always, and typically uh, the pandemic would not have been the case, but still you can't always control that, and I didn't make the most of what I had in that situation. And
Mm-hmm.
so then I think a lot of people in this position you know probably would have seen this as a big wake-up call. You just lost out on a huge return offer that would have had you set for life, and like
Right.
like not for the rest of your career, and like put you in such a good spot for wanting to achieve everything that you wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And taking care, I was still with my girlfriend at this time, like like taking care of like financially of your future when you want to start a family someday with this person maybe.
Right.
And like and they would have taken that, and they would have been like, I need to make a change. And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I did. I knew that I needed to make a change, but I still didn't. I didn't have the right resources. I don't know what it was exactly, but I didn't. I didn't allow the right resources to help me. I didn't want to take those steps to actually do it. I wanted to make a change, and I think this is a common theme for throughout a lot of this was like, something bad happens. I know I want to make a change, but I think I can do it on my own, which was probably the wrong answer. And
Mm-hmm.
B, that, you know, without doing it, I was expecting results. Without doing actually what I needed to do, which probably wasn't, me acting by myself, I was expecting results. And I think a big part of this was I didn't want to give up smoking. And I knew that, it was spilling over into, other parts of my life that I didn't want it to. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to give it up. So I sort of convinced myself that, you know, I could still do it. I could still do whatever I needed to and not give it up. And while that ultimately sort of has been the case, I still am not happy with my current amount of usage. But
Mm-hmm.
um, ultimately, like I I had not set good boundaries with it, and it was spilling over into the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I still hadn't made the proper change, and my schooling suffered for it. I ended up failing another class. The second and final class that I failed and basically I stopped getting lucky, and I tempted my
Mm-hmm.
fate too much, and I deserved it, and I stopped getting lucky, and I failed a class that I needed to graduate one extra semester away from graduating. And not only was it a class that I needed to graduate, it was a class that was part of a two-part series class, which means that you had to take the first one before you take the second.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that I needed to spend my last semester taking the first part again. And that meant that I had to take the second part of the class in another semester, which they offered over the summer, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
But I I needed to take another course over the summer.
Right.
Anyway, I was so embarrassed by this. I kept it very secret. I wouldn't say, changed a ton of my behavior after this, but I was better, I think, in the short term with things. I was just doing everything, and maybe just the bare minimum, but doing what I needed to do to graduate. I was focused on that, and I ended up sort of keeping it from a lot of my friends that this is what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to, pretend that, I was graduating with everyone right then and there, and ultimately, for all intents and purposes, I did. It didn't really matter, affect things. And all the while, I still hadn't secured a job for next year, and so my friends were starting to knock theirs out, and so I'm applying, and I applied for a job that was out of the town that I went to school, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a startup, which is what I'd wanted to where I wanted to work. I'd said, like I really want to feel part of something, and I think that that's something that at this point in my life still I really need to
Mm-hmm.
feel excited and get to get out of bed in the morning. But I felt like I was part of something in this place hypothetically, or I thought I would. It was in the field that I was interested in, cybersecurity. It was in,
Mm-hmm.
it's in education, actually, cybersecurity education. So I really
Mm-hmm.
thought that like that would, sort of overlap with my desire to teach other people.
Mm-hmm.
and like, help other people. And so I was really like, I was excited about it, and I was going to be part of the core team. I was going to get a stake in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And after I was supposed to, after graduation, go on a trip to Europe with my girlfriend. I did. I had a blast. And the day I got back, I was supposed to start this job.
Mm-hmm.
It was a remote job, basically 100% remote job. And I don't know why I did it again, but I set myself up for failure in a world where remote jobs were no longer even the norm, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
They were starting to become extremely common to at least have a hybrid work schedule or mostly come into the office. But I decided that, that would work for me, and it was what I wanted. And so I kind of didn't choose to apply logic anymore. And I think part of this was I also had not resolved my underlying problem with my drug use. And I
Mm-hmm.
it it's I had um I'd started, and the exact same pattern that happened at Amazon that I told myself I would never let happen again.
Yeah.
I hadn't really addressed the core issue, and so of course it happened again, and I ended up getting losing that job because I wasn't able to, keep I wasn't able to deliver on anything. I was making promises I couldn't keep, and
Mm-hmm.
I eventually, I ended up completely crushed, thinking my life was over at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, right before this happened, I ended up booking a session with the Pokemon boot camp. I was spending so
I
much time
remember. I
probably
remember.
instead of doing work, playing Pokemon, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
shit, like I want to take, if I'm taking this seriously, I'm spending so much time on this, I want to take it more seriously. At this point, I'd probably gotten a little better through brute force
Mm-hmm.
and reading the book and, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotten better, probably sitting 1500s,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know, I'm still not good, but I still sort of know what I'm doing. And
Right.
I never thought that I was good. Like, it's pretty, there's a ladder. You can tell if you're good, right? So,
Right.
but
Well,
I,
you'd be surprised, but yeah.
yeah, fair enough. But anyway, so I was frustrated with my plateauing. I was like, I spend so much time on this that I want to actually get better. And I had also listened to the podcast. I was like, you know what? Like, this is something that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I did it. And we had some sessions, and we talked
Mm-hmm.
about just like what was going on in my life, and then also Pokemon. And I actually,
Mm-hmm.
my life right after doing this, I can't tell you, started just taking the quickest possible turnarounds. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even end up finishing all of our
You
sessions
didn't. Yeah, you didn't.
because all of a sudden my life just sort of was like, oh, hey, buddy, like life does not stop, and you got to keep up, and you can do this. And I think a
Right.
lot of that was, I think, confidence gained from insane progression in like 4 sessions, 6 sessions
Mm-hmm.
or something. Um, I think the biggest thing
Yeah.
that helped me was in our very first meeting. I, as much as I knew I wasn't good,
Mm-hmm.
I'd read your book before, and so I sort of, I don't know if it was subconscious, looking to impress, like I'm on top of
Yeah.
this, but
Right.
I wasn't. I was being a little bit too cocky, like I almost didn't need help,
Mm-hmm.
and I I remember you humbled me. It was just like sort of like why are we here? Like do you want to like to hear from someone who's done it, like who knows what to do, or do you want to like think that you know what to do better? And it's because I didn't follow exactly the instructions. I
Mm-hmm.
decided to um I decided to I think I think what it was specifically was we're supposed to review our
Yeah, it was
um
something like that.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
I remember what it was. Yeah. It was we were supposed to review our VOD or our replays, and
Mm-hmm.
you had said to comment on things that you did well. And
Right.
I started commenting on both things that I had done well and things that I had done poorly because I'm so
Right.
self-aware, and I can do it and I don't need to listen to the instructor who knows what they're
Right.
doing.
Right. Right. Of
And
course.
you were like, you were like, okay, like why? Like why are you not listening to the instructions? Like what's the point? Like do you think you know better effectively? And I was like, I think I did. I didn't think that I knew better consciously, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like why did
Mm-hmm.
I make that decision? Like why do I feel the need to challenge this all the time? Like he's absolutely correct. Like I came to him for help. Like why am I doing it differently? And I think what it was for me at the time was I thought I sort of already knew what to do, but
Mm-hmm.
I needed something like our sessions to sort of force me to do it. Someone holding me
Mm-hmm.
accountable, and I think that that is something that the boot camp offers that is
Yeah.
different. But I also didn't want to be held accountable in a way that I thought that I didn't think made sense. I don't know exactly, but anyway,
Mm-hmm.
from there I was like, okay, yeah, I needed to be challenged, and I think that really helped. That really helped. Changed my perspective on things, but mostly with Mons at the time. But I
Right.
then started seeing, once I actually started listening, I started seeing progress. Now I mostly play for fun now. I haven't been super focusing, and I often will end up playing while I'm high, and then I definitely am not focused, and I
Right.
make some stupid ass decisions, and I sack the win con like way too early or something like that.
Right.
But I or or I exhaust the Terra like way too early. But I at the time when I was like I'm taking this seriously, I saw a jump up to like the 1800s
Mm-hmm.
from like the 1400s, 1500s,
Right.
sometimes my peak in the 1600 just by being consistent, listening, actually following what I wanted. And then right at the end, right when I was like, got my confidence, I was like, okay, great. Like I really wanted to, I'd set all these goals of like really wanting to be in tournaments, and,
Mm-hmm.
really wanting to do certain other things. I wanted to get more involved with the academy and everything. Um, Life was like, oh, you thought you were on break. Like we
Right.
gotta keep going. And at this point, I needed to find a place to live. Like I
I remember
graduated, finishing my
your
school.
girlfriend moved in with you. You told your
Yeah, and so
parents that you take
we
care of her.
moved in together. Sorry, say that again? Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, you told me that you had said to her parents that basically you spoke them into agreeing to let her move in with you. Was that right?
Not quite, but basically we had been planning on moving in together for a while. At the time, I was concerned about telling her parents sort of what happened. I was really embarrassed of what it was. I didn't want to tell anybody I knew
Okay.
that happened, because everything before I was supposed to be when I was a kid, right? I mean, sure,
Mm-hmm.
I was an adult, but now it's a real adult life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I was supposed to have it handled by then. Another thing I forgot to mention. So I sort of did, but I didn't mention just how conflated these things were. But I said that I got back from my trip and then I started work. But I also said that I had to take summer class to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So I had misrepresented to the people that I got hired that I had actually already graduated. Or I just sort of neglected to mention that I needed another course to graduate. So I was trying to balance doing that class to graduate, doing work, and also like moving out of my apartment at school, moving home to my parents' house for temporary, and then trying to find a place to live with my girlfriend in the
Mm-hmm.
area, and like doing all of these things. And I didn't have practice doing any one of them, much
Mm-hmm.
less all of them together. And I think that was also, another key example of the environment was not good, but I also sort of put myself in that situation. Like I could have taken steps to prevent that, but that's so easy in that situation to blame the environment instead of your decisions that put you there. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I did. I ended up actually doing the IOP again in that summer. Went back. I think I learned a lot. It was right around the time I did the academy. I like
Mm-hmm.
specifically found time to go back in and do it, and
Mm-hmm.
it ended up helping me a lot. I talked to these people. I was reminded of things, and I'd also had the confidence from seeing all this progress in something again
Mm-hmm.
to like believe in myself, which is sort of something I maybe had been missing. And
Mm-hmm.
also took a
Yeah.
long and hard look at smoking, and I took a 2-month hiatus. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I know that this is not is not working for me right now. Like, and it's extremely common. There's my family was sharing, research from, Stanford professors about how, people who start smoking, for their anxiety, actually will end up getting worse rebound anxiety. And the best way to resolve that is, like, they found like 80% of people were doing better after 30 days of not smoking. And so I was like, I set out the goal to 30 days of not smoke. I did it, and I was feeling way better. And another thing that was a huge benefit of this for a while, at least, and I think this is still the case to this day, is smoking became more enjoyable. I wouldn't do it during the day. It would be like, more of a treat, as opposed to something that I felt like I needed, something that I like, that was like just like part of my life now,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just like, it was just how I decided to operate. And what I had convinced myself of was healthy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I then started applying for more jobs. I got 2 job offers, actually, and I sort of had the choice to decide between the two of them. I went and I showed up to the interview at this one place after I'd mostly been considering another, and this is where I'm still working.
Mm-hmm.
It was a startup, and I walked in, and you know, I could tell right away that these were my people. And the work was in person. It was doing
Mm-hmm.
something not in the cybersecurity field. It was something I had familiarity with, and it also was sort of it's in the drone field and robotics,
Mm-hmm.
and it was sort of back in what actually got me into and interested in being, a software engineer. Back in high school, I was the captain of the robotics team, and
Mm-hmm.
I sort of was like, like, this isn't what I like technically went to school for, but I know I have the skills to do this, and I think it could be exciting, and so I took it, and uh, now I'm still working there, 10, 11 months later,
Mm-hmm.
and when I say this place has brought the best out of me, um, I can't begin to emphasize that enough. I felt like I got my swagger back from, high school, where I was then, when I was, you know, really invested in what I was doing, and I tried my best, and I got a lot out of it. I was learning more than I ever had in such a short amount of time. I was contributing right away, and up to the point where now I'm the lead software engineer at this company,
Yeah, I
and we've
heard you
gone.
tell me that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we've gone through a lot. And saying I'm the lead software engineer at this company when there are very few other engineers
That's
is
not the
is
point.
a
That's not the point.
misrepresentation. But I'm able to be the only, software engineer at this company, if not one of the only. We have a couple of interns, and the CTO, CEO also does some engineering work. But
Right.
I you know, I yeah, like I stepped up in a way where I was, able to be the only software engineer and the lead software engineer at this company. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not been easy. It's been a mess along the way, and I've worked crazy hours. I think I've been in that office at every single discrete minute of the day, at some point. So I've been there
Mm-hmm.
times at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I've been there,
Oh,
8.
that's what you mean.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So at any point, you pick a minute, I've probably been in that office before at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and and I got to travel to Las Vegas for work, and I like represent the company at a trade show, and it was
Amazing.
amazing. People were asking me on the floor, "Oh, so you do sales?" I'm like, "Actually, I'm the lead software engineer. I just am traveling with. I'm just part of this small company." And actually, we ended up having layoffs. Layoffs. It's sort of a misrepresentation. We were like a 10-person company, and we were
Mm-hmm.
having problems, with everything. Our tech was not working. We're right now we're startup. We're borrowing other people's money. We're spending other people's
Of
investors'
course.
money to try and build something. And our core tech was good, but our drone was not reliable, and we had run out of cash, and
Mm-hmm.
so they had to basically temporarily lay off or furlough, however you look at it,
Mm-hmm.
basically the entire staff except for me and one other person. At that
Mm-hmm.
point, I become so critical to the way everything operated there that I was one of the two people that management chose to keep on full time because they knew that, sort of that's what I needed to
Mhm.
that's what they needed, I should say, to get them through this hump. And we've since been able to hire basically everyone back, and we're out
Mhm.
back and operating. We've had some successful demos just as recently as last Tuesday or a couple of Tuesdays ago. And you know, things are things are going well. I'm still, uh, I struggle with always being as productive and excited and invested as I once was, especially as are so invested in this. It has its ups and downs, but I'm like making good money. I
Mhm.
am, I'm, found something I'm passionate about again. It's brought the best out of me, and
Mhm.
I'm I feel like myself again. I feel like, there's some other part of me that has been hiding, that's been a voice that's been wanting me to change this whole time. But there's some other part of me that I was not willing to let go of, that wasn't really willing to do what it took to change. And I don't know exactly what it is. I think confidence is the biggest component of it. But I can't emphasize enough how much just practicing
Mhm.
doing the right thing is has been helpful for me, and how much habits sort of contribute to to negative like outcomes, and it
Yeah.
can be really hard to break those habits, but the only way you can do it is by starting. And I'd always sort of lack the activation energy, if you will,
Mhm.
to actually get over the hump and doing even an individual task that would be in the right direction.
Mhm.
um But yeah, now I've been trying to get back into Mons a lot more. I never
Mhm.
stopped playing, but trying to take it a little bit more seriously again. I'm looking for a little bit of a hobby outside of work again. I started getting into cars as well.
Mhm.
I feel like I actually have more time in a way to be myself than I
Mhm.
did before, when I was sort of always like playing catch up for what I
Mhm.
had, and always just coping with stress that I had sort of forward projected for myself to deal with later. Um, so yeah, and then you had stopped posting for a while, and I saw your most recent video, and I was so excited, and I talked to my girlfriend about it, and
Mhm.
she was like, "Oh wow!" Like, and I actually told somebody, "Oh, I did the boot camp," which is usually a weird thing you don't want to tell your friends, like,
Yeah, of
or
course, of
like,
course.
you don't like, yeah, I paid money to do a Pokemon boot camp, and then
Yeah.
everyone's like, "You did what?" But I actually I talked about it. I talked about it, and I was like, and yeah, actually, like part of this guy's thesis is like how getting better and more disciplined at Mons is, something that
Mhm.
will, translate into the rest of
Mhm.
your life. And I had listened to these other experiences. And then while I was telling the story, my girlfriend's listening, and she's like, honestly, his life really did turn around right after that. Like, and that made me feel like, like, A, really good, because I agree, but also sort of dignified in, doing that, and not like, I never got sass about it, but
Right.
like, just being like really, feeling like this was like such a good use of my time, and I always felt like it was, but I didn't even
Yeah.
finish. I it was symbolic for me in a lot of ways. But anyway, yeah. So I part of that has been like, I really want to get back into taking Mons more seriously. I saw you post it
Mhm.
again recently, and I reached out, and I was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know like how impactful that's been. You were talking about stories you had shared, um
Mhm.
and I was like, yeah, like you should absolutely, because you talked about wanting to do more psychology based content, or at least just
Yeah.
you specifically, the theme of your return was, you know this is why
Y-
I was been doing this. Not, Pokemon for a while was a motivator for you, but then that changed. And so I guess that's maybe, I don't want to put
Mhm.
words in your mouth, but that might be, why that part of why that hiatus came. And then
For sure. I couldn't. I don't think I'd wanted to admit that to myself, right? Because
yeah.
as you mentioned, it's such a big part of our lives growing up that, like, I view, not a view. This is how I am. like like members of the academy, air quotes subscribe. Like when I think about everybody, I don't think about them as like subscribers. Like whenever I refer to the channel offline, it would be like it's very close to a fraternity in my mind. Like it's these are
Right.
real people to me. So it felt closer to. It wasn't about leaving my. It was like it's like leaving the fraternity. It's like, but but all my people are. That's how it was. So there is a lot of resistance around even admitting to myself that is it possible that my desire to compete in the way I used to is waning, but I can't leave my people, right? I can't. And so I had to really take that time to think about, well, why don't I want to leave? Like, is it? And then what struck me is, and you have no idea how meaningful your story is, particularly in this period, because I still have moments where, in coming back, nobody's ever attempted the thing I'm doing, right? Games
Mhm.
are usually projected as something to escape life from, escape life with.
Right.
So, so the idea of the escape becoming the thing that liberates you is very like that's a
Absolutely.
very odd context. So,
Absolutely.
so it's like it's building something that I know is real from scratch, and knowing that I'm still in the beginning phases, and knowing that it isn't going to be well received initially. Not like we are having haters, but it's just a really tricky concept to wrap your mind around until you experience it. Right? It's like, can Mons
Right.
really like? And then you realize your habitual changes in real life, and you can't go like, that's a coincidence. Like beyond the
Yeah.
point, this happens so much every time. It wasn't like one or two. Like you heard but this so many of these stories aren't put on the podcast. I
Right.
mean, ungodly amounts of messages. And it's like, it's the weirdest thing. I started actually just, when I started focus on what I was doing well offline, I was applying that. I'm like, dang, what am I doing? And whether it be, because a lot of the people who do the boot camps are actually like you, right? They're very left brained software engineer types, computer science types, math, like very left brain males,
Hmm.
and who are very technical, which probably is why they're drawn to my style of content. But they're not with the airy fairies. They're like facts and provables. And so, that particular audience, even more so, is not an easy audience to convince that this is, so there's an element of it where it's, man, like, is this is a hell of a mountain to climb, but I'm not the type, very sensitive to regret. So I cannot leave a project until it's done unless I can genuinely feel like I've given it my, and I didn't feel like that was true. So I was like, I know I can't leave yet. I'm not done. What's on the horizon? I don't know, but I know my work here isn't done, as far as like letting it be known that, guys, whether it's CG, like whatever the ladder system is, whatever the men in particular, we're very status driven. No male wants to be the lowest on the hierarchy. Like we want to feel useful. You mentioned feeling like you're contributing, right? And so that's really important to males in particular. Sure, women have their version, but it's very different. That's why most of the competitive games are all male driven, right? All of them are men, because in the past that might have looked like something military related, or, and so now it's like that drive has been channeled into the online space, and so men still have that drive to compete and to go against another person and defeat them and conquer, and it's
Right.
just channeled in the vehicle of video games now, right? You see how angry people like nobody's angrier than somebody that just got hacks on Showdown,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
right.
I I
So
we played in a live the other day, and I hacked you, and you were bugging out on the video.
I was
Funny.
like, this is crazy. It's just funny that my response, I haven't played in forever, and my responses have not, like, my emotional response, I'm not like that in anything else. I'm
No,
usually very.
absolutely. And it's such a that's such an example of sort of asking for it. Like you open up playing Showdown, like you are asking to be hacked. You're
Oh
asking
yeah,
for your day to be ruined. You're playing a luck-based game. Like but you know what? We still do it. So
we
uh,
do.
because I think there's something special about it. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think for the most part, it is really in your control how well you do, and
Hmm.
obviously there's variance. I think variance in a lot of competitive
Hmm.
things ends up making them usually more fun and more interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe less competitively sound, but typically more fun and more interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think it didn't need to be Mons for me. It happened to work out that it was, but also, my job sort of ended
Hmm.
up, being another one of those things. And I just think, you know, my biggest sort of realization or piece of advice or whatever has just always been to find something that you care about and take it seriously and work towards it, a real goal. Because
Hmm.
like I feel like it will carry over, whether it's Mons, whether it's something else.
Hmm.
When
Martial
you
arts,
when you
whatever.
practice being good at something else and you actually do it the right way, that practice is not just useful
Hmm.
in that context. That the
Nope.
discipline and the also just, the passion and the practice, thinking and the practice,
Hmm.
being with the practice of self-control and all of
Hmm.
these things, like they're just
Emotional
skills.
self-control. Hmm.
Absolutely. They're skills that are useful in every context. So, or at least most contexts.
and
Um,
and and Mons is a cognitive game. So
yeah,
the
it
skill
helps.
sets are gonna come. The benefits are gonna be in the mental dimensions of your life. Whereas, let's say, it's martial arts. There's a mental component, but there's also a physical component. Like
Yeah,
Mons is, you might get 90% or 100% mental improvement. Because if you think about what Mons is, it's really three steps. There's memory or recall. There's visualization, which is you visualizing every scenario that could happen. And then there's reasoning, which is picking one that's the best of all the options. That's chess. That's every cognitive. That's business. That's almost every other cognitive game. And I had one of my best friends in real life. I was training him up from ground zero, meaning he doesn't know, no, he didn't even know why Sucker Punch went first, level of new.
yeah,
And he's like, this is, now I understand why in college you were like this. Because you'd
right,
always have this thing of like visualizing every scenario possible. This is
absolutely.
outside of mine. And, and, and reasoning down the best options. Now, I didn't think that was a Mons thing. I just, you're not correlating those. But he's like, as I started to learn this, I noticed my cognitive ability outside of Mons has been ridiculous. Like, I'm like, but what are the downside and risks and rewards? And he's like, it's been super weird observing me develop the trait I always saw you have in college. And I'm like, you probably got that from, and I'm like, man, I didn't even think about that kind of risk versus rewarding of everything and being able to process a lot of data. And it's like, that is what Mons is. And there's a ton of variance just like in life, right? You can do everything right and get hacked in life. And
Absolutely.
so it's like, oh, damn. Or you can do everything wrong, like, and get lucky and crit the
Yeah,
class, right?
yeah, and
And
I mean, it's so common, I feel like, to both in Mons, like, after hacking someone else, just blaming or like just like not recognizing your failures in that game and sort of just being like, oh well, I won and like so therefore, whatever, who cares? Outcome
mm-hmm,
evaluation
mm-hmm,
is not the way to go. And then it's also so easy to see, oh, I got hacks and
yep.
just blow up the computer, like, get
Yep.
extremely upset, and then actually had that whole game was still within your control, and yeah,
Yep.
you got hacked, but you put yourself in a position to get hacks. You also
Yep.
still could have won if you played better, and you're focusing instead on outcome evaluation instead of, what you actually did, that
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not those were good choices.
Mm-hmm.
And it's extremely common to, it's exactly what I did in real life, and it's helped me sort of, you know, dealing with, and maybe you know getting frustrated in Mons is also sometimes a good outlet, but like it's taught me how to, handle, being in a relationship and conflict
Mm-hmm.
with other people as well. And also just like, like sometimes you do everything right and it just doesn't work out, and,
Mm-hmm.
being able to live with that, but then also, understanding, when, yeah, maybe the situation wasn't ideal, but you still made a lot of mistakes. And if you don't
Mm-hmm.
learn anything from this, you'll regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Don't click
and
X. Yep.
yeah, so it can be really easy to just, blame it on something else. And I think something that's cool about Mons is there's a ladder, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
with there's gonna be variance. You're gonna lose games that you should have won, but
Mm-hmm.
you move up. You're not supposed to win every game, but you're supposed to
Right.
win more of them than you lose, and keep moving up if you deserve it, I guess. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can tilt and crash, but there's actually a really, really healthy way, or a really, really helpful way to measure progress, which can be harder in real life to quantify a goal. It can be harder in
Mm-hmm.
in another context, quantify a goal. And I think that's always what I had struggled with, was like, I want to make a change, but I don't know a quantifiable goal to.
Mm.
And so I
That's
think that Mons
yo.
is so perfect.
That's
Um,
crazy. That's
so
actually that's actually crazy. You just gave me a major insight. Because that is a good point. I never thought about the fact because it's like you're. And I was talking to a buddy this morning, and he was sharing some of the changes, and you know, I use and give many of my friends a lot of the tools that I'd give somebody that I'm working with from a client standpoint, right?
mhm.
And I gave him a tool that would provide a lot of clarity, and he did it, and we said we're going to track your behavior over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so he did that, and he was sharing some of the changes, and when a funny line he made was like, because he also smokes, and we reduced a lot of his smoking. He was probably a 4 blunt a day guy, 4 or 5 blunts a day guy, and so he's
Yeah,
like, actually I'm down to 1 blunt a day, right? And he's like, but nothing crazy, nothing major. I just I don't pick up my phone in the morning anymore. Blah, blah, blah. And so I said it was a eureka moment for me and a reminder for me to go. He really thinks because you know how like for a plane, if it's off by half a degree, it's such a drastic. It's in
right.
Hawaii versus California, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And so it was so funny to me in that moment. One, it was a humbling reminder for myself that he really thinks 4 blunts and 1 blunt are similar. Like 4 blunts a day over a year, the person you're gonna be versus 1 blunt, even if you just taste the one per day for the night and day person. And
Absolutely.
but because the timeline hasn't pushed out far enough yet, he still thinks that's a small insignificant change. Like, and I'm like, right, the small stuff is the big. It was like a really slap in the face reminder. The small stuff is the big stuff, and
Yeah.
it was one of those things. So when you said just now, something to see progress in, that's such a. It's so in your face that I never really thought about in the fact that right, that's everything. Like, what can you do when life is in turmoil and you feel like you're not progressing anything? That's the ultimate nightmare.
That's
So,
absolutely how I felt, right? And I was so stagnating in everything. I was kept making the same mistakes in life and Mons, and then, all of a sudden, I mean, I did make a change, but,
mhm,
and also I think it can be fine, and you can cope well, with life if, feels like life's progressing and you're sort of just it's just getting handed to you. But there's
Mhm.
something else about, the come up and also, just like working for something. It's extremely
Yeah.
rewarding. And so it's not just that I was progressing at something because I was easy like I did in high school maybe or and
Mhm.
growing up. It was just like things came naturally to me, but I actually had to really try hard and apply myself. And
Mhm.
then I was getting a reward and it was like, this is what being a human is about. Like, this is
Yeah.
what like this is what makes me want to get up in the morning. So
Yeah. Man, I am. And it's crazy. I remember us having a very particular conversation before. It was either the session right before the last one or the last one, where there was a kind of a full circle moment where one of the convos we had, either it was about the teachability index. Did I ever teach you that? The teachability index?
I think you did. I can't say I remember
Okay.
right. But it sounds familiar.
Okay. The high willingness to learn versus the high willingness to accept change.
Yeah,
The
yeah. That sounds
mhm.
familiar.
Okay. Because I think I remember having to break something really specific down to you that you said was really big or something else that happened offline. Um, because in the initial convo, it's like, well, but the teachability index, that sounds like something I would have had to explain to how you were back then. But it was
Yeah,
like basically you had a high, like people, for somebody to learn information quickly and improve quickly, they need to have a high teachability index. And that's basically high willingness to learn, high willingness to accept, to willingness to accept change. So a lot of times people will book the boot camp and they have a high willingness to learn. They're like, oh yeah, I know Jam knows his stuff. But then when it comes time to implement, they have a low willingness to accept change. So if you're trying to improve at anything, whether it be karate, whatever the thing is, if your willingness to learn, people forget that, oh, but I want to learn this stuff, right? The proof is in that I paid for it. But then when the follow through time comes, just like, oh, my willingness to accept change is zero, right? So it's like, or a one. So if we're gonna multiply it and say willingness to learn is a 10, and then multiply by your willingness to accept change, 10 times zero is zero, right? So if you don't want to change, you're like, oh, I'm not gonna do new things. I mean, I just want to know new stuff. I just want new information. Then nothing is going to matter, and that's your willingness to accept change skyrocketed
right.
after
Right.
the first session,
Absolutely.
and then your results skyrocketed naturally because this is a formula. It's not. I think if people realize how formulaic getting from bottom to top is, they'd
Absolutely.
be like, man.
And I think that a lot of times that unwillingness to accept change comes from almost like mostly subconscious, but this like desire to not find out if you can't do it.
For
Like
sure.
having an excuse in the back so that way, like if it doesn't work out, you have a way to sort of defend yourself to yourself of
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, but I didn't really
Try.
try,
Yeah.
like, and people don't often actually admit that, but or like they won't even admit that to themselves sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
it's usually something that I feel like it's common for people to hold back on actually taking the final step.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, yeah.
100%. Congratulations, bro. Like you've come a long way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, I mean, seriously. I look back at the thread as we were talking, because I was like, when? And realized our last session was August of last year. I don't know why I remember it being more recent, but but that makes sense because I was hiatus. Even my hiatus felt like it was short, but I was gone
7
all of
months?
this year. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's crazy. Where the hell did seven? I can't even fathom how 7 months went by. I really felt like I'm gonna be right back. Like it didn't. I was like, I gotta, my mom's in the States. I gotta like make sure she's settled in, and so that was just my primary focus. Um, and so it does not feel anywhere, and even right now, it doesn't feel like I'm in the summer. It feels like the entire month, like half the year, just blinked away.
Right.
And so when you messaged me, it felt like I was, oh yeah. I remember I was like, oh yeah, you didn't even finish. What happened? Like I remember vividly, which is why I can remember even the story of you going about, oh, I had to talk to my girlfriend's parents. Or you had just, I don't even know if you had moved into somewhere yet. If you did, you
It
just
was
moved
just
in there.
before. It was just before. Yeah, and
Right.
I now moved again, and I'm living somewhere else since then. That's how long it's been. So
Exactly. So
yeah,
it's like that was almost a year ago. Like a month from now will make a year ago. Not even a month,
yeah,
like 3 weeks
absolutely.
from now. So
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, that was a while ago. And I remember, and so it's always, and bro, I really mean this, man. I appreciate you coming on and sharing, because I know at least one person. I mean, I know way more than one person. And what I loved about this episode in particular is that it just felt like a conversation that everybody else got to join on, and it was very real. Um,
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to share. And I know like hearing from other people like me in the past has helped me so much. And both on this podcast, and IRL and in other situations. But um yeah, so I'm happy to share, and I hope that someone, is able to take what I said and learn from it. So
100%. I know somebody out there, or at least one person, is like everything you were saying was them. They're like, I have a weed problem. I'm in college right now. They're like 2 years behind you or a year behind you. Like it's like uncanny how mirrored your story is.
yeah.
And they're like, yo, how can I reach out to this guy, bro? I need help. I feel like I'm about to explode. I just lost my like
Well, I would love
night
people
and
to
day.
not have to, make the same mistakes that I did and sort of be able to learn from that in advance of doing it. I mean, for me, it did help in some ways that I sort of made my own mistakes, but I think, you should always hope that, someone else can be in a better place from your mistakes, try and learn from someone else's.
100%. And so with that, is there a final sort of, given you've gone through the boot camp kind of, but like you followed through with the Mons thing, right? Even though it's super counterintuitive. You mentioned being naturally frugal, says like it just all of it made sense not to do. For some reason you did it.
Yeah.
And it was a massive impact. So it's like, as a final word to the audience, um, given a year later since that happened and life being very different, uh, what would you want somebody to know?
Yeah, I think the first thing is it's never too late to change, and I think, that was something that I sort of always would cling on to as well, of just like kind of like maybe feeling like, it's too late now, like I sort of made my bed, I lay in it,
Dude, you're
and
22.
and I don't
He
need
said
to.
too late.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I and I don't know if I meant necessarily in the grand scheme of things, but I meant, at least in my individual problems, but
Yeah.
it's never too late, to don't feel like your life is over at any point, because, like usually when you hit rock bottom, the only place you have to go is up. And that sounds cliche, that sounds cheesy, but especially when that happens,
Yep.
if you make choices that uh that put you in a good position, you can get there. And I think the biggest thing for me has just been to find something that you care about, whatever it is, and just actually put everything into it, because you'll get something out of it. And that getting something out of it is to me, that's my purpose in life. That's the point of life, is just, feeling reward from hard work, and I'm enjoying, life and everything, but like like believing in yourself and everything. Like
Hmm.
it's what's rewarding. So
So you'd leave them with the point about it's never too late, and then what would be the second point that you said?
yeah, just it's never too late, and find something you care about, and put everything into it.
Find something you care about and put everything. Perfect. All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. This was beyond needed because I'm human as well. There are times where I'm like, man, is this worth my? Because there's so many other things that it's the weirdest thing. That's what I'll close it out with. It's the weirdest thing, guys, and I'm talking to the audience. There's so many other things that, just being very frank, would make me or have made me a very rich man by now, and I cannot put into words why I can't leave this until it's done. Um, it's definitely one of those. It's like a spiritual magnetism that my work here isn't done, and every time I leave and come back, I get an immediate reminder why. Even when I have the moments of like, does this really matter? I made that post. 20 people probably saw it. Nobody wants to. You want the ultimate leverage, right? If you're putting a lot of time and effort into something, you want to know you're making the grandest impact possible. And so, given that I do have other outlets that I could really double down on, that to everybody else would actually seem like the more like more so like, well, why aren't you doing this instead? We know you could do this and reach this many people or go this route. And it doesn't make complete sense yet, but I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like guy gamers are my people. To those though, that's my people to help. I can't explain why, but that's the group of guys I'm here to serve the most. The guy on the other side of the screen that uses the video game to escape and is suffering behind that avatar, and nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. And so I was that kid as a teenager, and Skype at the time, Discord wasn't even really around, but like, you know those moments of being able to connect and play my online friends when I didn't have a ton of high school friends at the time, just coming to the States, everything, uh that was everything, right? And so to fathom not having that community, not being available now, I think that's one of the big motivations for why the academy was a place as well, why I'm so communal, because I just know there are real people behind those screens, and I get the DMs and such, but I'm one guy. And so it's like, yeah, the work isn't done. And even though rationally would make sense, like how somebody would say, well, why don't you go to some other traditional means. A lot of guys actually come to me in particular because they feel like, I actually don't want traditional sit on the couch style therapy. They want more targeted, fix the core problem kind of solution oriented, like performance psychology, not necessarily prolonged therapy. And so they're like, as a guy, I appreciate the fact that you go straight to the root cause, and I can get the behavioral change in 2 sessions instead of 7 months of weekly. Like, usually, you've heard the podcast, it doesn't take, we can get to the core of an issue very quickly. And that's more I want people to never need me. I want somebody, when after they come, to never have to come back, rather than this repeated cycle of I kind of want you to heal, but if you heal, then you're no longer a client. And so that's a lot of what I notice. I'm like, man, if you had the right tools, this shit should have been handled by now. But that's a different conversation. So this conversation that you just shared with me was just another sort of moment of like, I still got some work to do. And Geo proved that, the seeds that got planted weren't in vain. Like, it does make a difference. And so I really appreciate that. And That's all I want to leave the audience with. So, no, this has
Thank,
been long enough. So thank you.
yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem, bro. And yeah, hit the subscribe button, hit like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, I'll link Geo's thing somewhere in the comment, I mean in the description, so that if you want to reach out to him for any advice or just want further details, either gonna be Discord or Twitter. All right, y'all. Peace.